Stop right there. Don't move. Is there a problem, officer? We got a call about a suspicious person matching your description loitering in the area. Do you live here? I do live here. I'm just walking back from the fitness center.
Elias Vance is a 45-year-old special agent in charge with the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, a position he has held for over 17 years. With an annual salary of $162,000 and a record of high-stakes undercover operations, Vance had recently purchased his home in Silver Creek Heights for $1.3 million, paying a consistent $7,200 monthly mortgage. On this Tuesday afternoon, his only objective was to finish a 4-mile walk following his workout, a routine documented by his smartwatch data. Officer Derek Hauer, age 34, has been with the local department for 9 years, earning a base salary of $65,000. Departmental records would later reveal 4 separate internal complaints against Hauer regarding biased policing and excessive force in the last 3 years, all of which were suppressed by the local union. Officer Jensen, 25, is a junior officer with less than 3 years on the force, earning $50,000 and possessing a record that indicates a tendency to defer to senior officers regardless of the legality of their orders. At this point, a fundamental question emerges for the observer. Do you believe the officer's initial stop was based on a legitimate, suspicious person report, or was the bias evident from the first second of the footage? Share your reasoning in the comments below. The location of the encounter, Silver Creek Heights, is a quintessential example of high-end suburban insulation. The neighborhood is characterized by meticulously manicured lawns, Belgian block curbing, and a demographic that is 96% white. The air is quiet, save for the distant hum of a leaf blower and the occasional passing of a European luxury SUV. The temperature is a crisp 58 degrees, and the late afternoon sun casts long, distorted shadows across the asphalt. In this environment, Elias Vance, a muscular black man in athletic gear, is perceived by some residents not as a neighbor, but as a statistical anomaly that requires verification. Vance's psychological state is one of calculated calm. As a federal agent who has managed multi-jurisdictional task forces, he is intimately familiar with the Fourth Amendment and the legal requirements for a Terry stop. He knows he is lawful, and he expects the officers to follow procedure. Conversely, Officer Hauer's psychological motive is rooted in territorial defense. To Hauer, Vance's presence represents a potential breach of the safety he is paid to maintain. He interprets Vance's lack of fear not as innocence, but as defiance or criminal sophistication. 16-14-22. The confrontation escalates as Vance refuses to provide physical identification without a stated crime. "I'm going to need to see some ID, man. We've had a string of break-ins around here lately." Hauer's tone shifts from authoritative to accusatory, a common tactic used to provoke a reaction that can then be categorized as disorderly conduct. The camera shows Hauer stepping into Vance's personal space, a distance of less than 24 inches, designed to trigger a physical flinch or a defensive push. "I haven't committed a crime, officer. Under state law, I'm not required to show you ID unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a felony." Vance's recitation of the law is precise, delivered without a hint of tremor. This level of legal literacy often irritates officers who are used to compliance born of ignorance or fear. Hauer's jaw visibly tightens on the high-definition footage, his hand moving from his holster to his handcuffs. "Listen, I'm not going to play lawyer with you on the sidewalk. You're being detained. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Jensen moves in simultaneously, reaching for Vance's left wrist. The audio captures the metallic click of handcuffs being readied. Vance does not resist, but he does not assist, maintaining a passive resistance that remains within the bounds of his rights, while forcing the officers to initiate every physical contact. 16-15-45. The footage shows Hauer and Jensen forcing Vance's arms behind his back. Vance's gym bag falls to the grass, the contents shifting with a dull thud. Hauer applies the handcuffs with excessive force, a detail later confirmed by the deep bruising and skin abrasions on Vance's wrists. "You're making a very big mistake, Officer Hauer. I suggest you check my wallet before you go any further." Vance's voice remains steady, even as his chest is pressed against the hood of the patrol car. The camera captures Hauer's face, which displays a smirk of perceived victory. He believes he has successfully subdued a suspect, who dared to challenge his authority in a neighborhood where he feels he is the ultimate arbiter of belonging. Yeah, everyone's a good guy once the cuffs go on. Jensen, watch the bag. I'm checking for weapons. Hauer begins a pat-down search. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches, and since Vance was detained for walking while suspicious, the legal justification for a full search of his person is precarious at best. Hauer's hands move to Vance's back pocket, extracting a leather bifold wallet. 16, 17, 10. The audio reveals the sounds of Hauer flipping through the wallet. The camera is angled down, showing the contents. There is no gun, no drugs, and no burglary tools. Instead, Hauer finds a heavy gold and blue shield and an identification card embossed with the seal of the Department of Justice. What is this? This a fake? You carrying a fake federal ID? Hauer's voice has lost its edge, replaced by a frantic higher pitch. He is looking at Vance's DEA credentials, specifically the Special Agent in Charge designation. The psychological shift is instantaneous. The predator has realized his prey is actually a superior officer in a federal jurisdiction. That's my federal commission. My name is Elias Vance. I live at 112 Silver Creek Drive, and you just violated the civil rights of a federal officer on camera. Vance speaks with a cold finality. The camera captures Hauer's hands beginning to shake slightly as he holds the credentials. He looks at Jensen, who has stepped back, his posture collapsing from an aggressive stance to one of visible regret. Jensen's eyes are darting toward his own body cam, likely realizing that every second of this interaction is being uploaded to a secure server. At this peak of escalation, we are faced with a legal and moral dilemma. If an officer realizes they have made a catastrophic error, should they be allowed to undo the arrest on the spot to avoid litigation? Or is the violation complete the moment the cuffs click? Let me know your stance in the comments. 16-18-30. The realization of the consequences begins to set in. Hauer does not immediately remove the handcuffs. Instead, he attempts to reason his way out of the situation, a psychological defense mechanism known as rationalization. Look, Agent Vance, you have to understand, we've had calls. You were wearing a hoodie. You were avoiding eye contact. We have to be sure. Hauer's breathing is now heavy and labored. He is attempting to build a retrospective narrative that justifies his actions. However, the footage from 16-12-05 shows Vance was walking openly, not avoiding eye contact, and was clearly on a public sidewalk. I wasn't avoiding eye contact. I was walking home. You didn't even ask for my name before you went for your holster. Uncuff me, now. Vance's command is not a request. It is a directive. Jensen is the one who steps forward to release the ratchets. The sound of the handcuffs unlocking is the only noise on the street for several seconds. Vance rubs his wrists, his eyes never leaving Hauer's face. He doesn't scream. He doesn't threaten. He simply picks up his gym bag and stares. I want your supervisor here. I want the watch commander. And I want you to keep those cameras running until they arrive. Hauer looks like he wants to speak, but his mouth merely hangs open. The quote 15 is complete. He knows that in the world of law enforcement, there is a quote 16. But that wall rarely extends to federal agents who have been physically assaulted by local patrol officers. The legal and financial aftermath of this encounter was not a swift bolt of lightning, but a slow, grinding process of procedural justice. Within 48 hours, the DEA's Office of Professional Responsibility and the Department of Justice were notified. A federal agency does not take kindly to its high-ranking agents being detained without cause, particularly when the underlying motive appears to be racial profiling. Internal Affairs launched an investigation that lasted 9 months. During this time, Officer Hauer was placed on administrative leave, receiving his full salary while the department's legal team scrambled to find a defense. They scoured Vance's background, hoping to find a quote 17 for the stop after the fact. They found nothing. Vance was a decorated veteran of the drug wars with 0 disciplinary marks on his record. The lawsuit followed shortly after. Vance's attorneys filed a Section 1983 civil rights claim against the city, the department, and officers Hauer and Jensen individually. The discovery phase revealed the 4 prior complaints against Hauer, which the city had failed to act upon. This established a quote 18 claim, arguing that the department had a quote 19 of ignoring biased policing, which opened the door for massive punitive damages. The court timeline was grueling. It took 22 months to reach a settlement. The city's insurance carriers, realizing the body cam footage was an insurmountable piece of evidence, eventually buckled. The total settlement was reached at $7.5 million. Of that, approximately $2.5 million went to attorney fees and legal costs, leaving Vance with a substantial sum that dwarfed his lifetime earnings as an agent. Officer Hauer was eventually fired, not just for the stop itself, but for the quote 20 found in his written report, which claimed Vance had been quote 21 quote and quote 22 quote, claims directly refuted by the video evidence. Officer Jensen was suspended for 60 days without pay and required to undergo extensive retraining. He eventually resigned from the force 2 years later, unable to escape the stigma of the recorded incident. The settlement of $7.5 million is paid by the taxpayers of the city, not by the officers' personal bank accounts or their pension funds. This leads to a heated debate. Should the law be changed to make officers personally liable for civil rights payouts, or would that prevent them from doing their jobs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where are they now? Elias Vance retired from the DEA 6 months after the settlement. The $5 million net payout allowed him to move his family to a private estate in a different state. He now serves as a consultant for civil rights law firms, using his insider knowledge of police tactics to help victims of profiling. He remains a quiet, private individual, but the Silver Creek incident is now a standard case study in many police academies across the country on the dangers of implicit bias and the power of body-worn cameras. Derek Hauer's decline was more pronounced. Following his termination, he was unable to find work in law enforcement anywhere in the state. His name had been entered into the National Decertification Database. He faced a series of personal setbacks, including a divorce and the loss of his home. He currently works in warehouse logistics, far removed from the power and authority he once wielded on the streets of Silver Creek Heights. This case serves as a cold, analytical reminder of the friction between truth and authority. In the absence of the body cam, the narrative would likely have been Hauer's word against Vance's, a battle that Vance might have won due to his status, but one that many others would have lost. The camera does not care about the prestige of the neighborhood or the experience of the officer. It merely records the deviation between what an officer claims is happening and what is actually occurring. The psychological motive of territorial policing is a powerful drug for those in uniform, but it often blinds them to the reality that the other they are targeting might be the very person they are supposed to answer to. In the end, the $7.5 million was not just a payment for a few minutes of detention. It was the price of a systemic failure to recognize the humanity and rights of a man simply because he didn't fit the profile of his own neighborhood. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.